Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. I'm not even gonna say it. I know you think you know what I'm gonna say next, but I'm not gonna say it. You may even want me to say it, but I'm not gonna say it. I shouldn't have to say it. Okay, fine. I can see the way you're looking at me. I'll say it. Grab your notepads, grab your pens, because I want you to take notes. I want you to make a commitment to yourself that you will jot down some sort of action item that you can implement in your business today, because that's what this is all about. Implementation to drive your business forward. Today we're gonna talk about sales, and we're gonna do so through the analogy of a restaurant and the sales that occur in a restaurant. So don't check out if you don't operate a restaurant, if you don't manage a restaurant, or even if you do, don't check out. This is just an analogy, and I have covered sales in, 3 or 4 other videos before, and the reason I want to talk to you about this today through this context, through this analogy, is based on a discussion I had recently in which, and I think this is a fairly common phenomenon, people, they don't really like to think of themselves as being in sales unless they are officially a career salesperson. So if you are a professional salesperson, then you think of yourself in sales. But so many other people sort of think, I don't want to be thought of as a salesperson. And yet in business, of course, you're in sales. You have to be in sales. You want to drive sales. Sales is at the very top of your income statement. You need to have sales. And so why is it that we somehow shy away from the idea that we need to be professional at sales? And so I grabbed onto this concept of the restaurant analogy. I actually got my start, I can't remember if I was, I think it was 14, maybe 13, 14 years old. Well, not 13. I think I was 14 years old when I got my start in the restaurant business. You don't care how old I was. I was young, and my very first job was in a restaurant, and I quite enjoyed that, and I learned so very many things, and I've alluded to this before. I spent a few years in the hospitality industry, and when I became a waiter within 1 year, I got promoted. And even though I wasn't legally able to serve alcohol, the owner of the restaurant made an exception and promoted me to waiter, and I had to get people who were of legal age to serve the alcohol to my patrons, which was a little unusual, but apparently I, in her mind, was worth the effort. And just to let you know, not to, as my old friend and mentor would say, not to impress you, but to impress upon you that I know what I'm talking about when it comes to the restaurant industry. I'm going to share a few details with you. I set several records in the restaurant business with respect to sales. And if you're not in the restaurant business, if you're not a server, you might not think of a server as being in sales. But you can understand when I say to you, and certainly any professional server, any successful server knows they have influence over sales. They have sales skills, and it really impacts their income. And it also impacts the service they give. It impacts the customer experience, the value that the restaurant delivers to the various patrons. So if you haven't really thought of a waiter or a waitress, a server as being in sales, then there will be some concepts here that will that resonate with you, I think. I set 3 records come to mind right now. One, I worked for a chain of restaurants, a franchise, and I set the record for the largest ring out, we used to call it. That's the number of sales on the report at the end of the night that this chain had among all of them. And my general manager of that restaurant said to me he was going to a general managers meeting where all the general managers from the various locations were getting together, and he was going to boast that he now had the record in his restaurant, and the person who set it did it by 9 p.m. And the whole point was, typically you would need to work a very long shift. I was the first off that evening, and I had set the new record. I did so in a very compact time frame. And then there was another restaurant, a much more upscale fine dining restaurant, and it only had a couple of locations. They had 3 restaurants, but this one was a seafood restaurant, fine dining, And there was a lunch shift and an evening shift. And we had posted in the staff area where, the waiters would, sip on a coffee. There was, little things there. People would store, maybe their jackets and stuff like that. And posted up there was the record for the lunch shift and for the evening shift. And these were records that stood throughout the years. In particular, the evening shift had stood for something like, I don't want to make it up, but I can't remember exactly. It may have been something like 5 years that record had stood for. Anyway, I set the lunch record first, and that was, again, the highest ring out that they had ever recorded in the history of that restaurant for the highest number of sales during a lunch shift. And I was proud of that, and we got a little prize. I got a little prize for that. And the evening one was the big one, though. That one, the lunch one had been broken a few times. That I don't remember, but that might have only been a 1 or 2 year standing record that I broke. The evening one, I set my sights on that, and I broke that record. And I did that in the same time, around the same time frame. It was leading up to Christmas, where it was the busiest time for the restaurant. And the person who held that record had worked there for many years, and he was working there still at the same time when I broke his record. I was very proud of that. And anyway, so I don't say that to impress you, but to impress upon you that I know what I'm talking about when it comes to sales. I was able to do certain things to drive my sales to accomplish those 3 records. And certainly those who've ever worked in hospitality and in the restaurant industry know what those things are. So let's explore that. Again, the reason I think this is important for you as a business owner, for you as a manager or as an aspiring manager to understand is because maybe you don't have a sales background. Maybe you've never worked as a professional salesperson. Maybe you fall under that category of people that just doesn't see yourself as a salesperson, but you acknowledge, hey, in my business, I need to drive sales. So how can I do that? So let's look at it through the lens of a restaurant in this analogy, because in the restaurant, often the patrons don't think of themselves as being sold to. Now, we can all appreciate, as we've been to a restaurant, that we can be influenced by the server, and they can convince us to maybe have something extra or have something more expensive, and that's sales. So what they're doing is they're communicating to the patrons in some way. So I want you to think of all the various ways that a restaurant sells to its patrons, that a restaurant sells to you. And then ask yourself, can you apply that analogy? Can you apply those tips for driving sales in your business? Because I really do think that we think of restaurants as, it's not offensive, it's not overtly or aggressive sales tactics that turn us off. And I think that's the problem that so many people who want to disassociate themselves with being a salesperson, and yet they're responsible for driving sales in an organization, they can appreciate, if I could find a way to drive sales where it wasn't so overt and it didn't turn off my customers, it wasn't aggressive, that's where I would want to gravitate to. And I think that's what's happening in general. My observation is businesses in general are more successful as they are more subtle with their sales approach. Now, I'm speaking to people of all different kinds of businesses that manage all different kinds of businesses within different industries. Some of you are contractors, others of you are in healthcare, some of you may be running not-for-profit organizations and looking for donors and volunteers, others are in agriculture or ranching, and the list goes on. And we all need to understand that we have to drive sales. So let's look at this. What ways do restaurants communicate to their patrons and drive sales? So sales and marketing are related. First, let's look at the marketing angle. So much of communication from a restaurant are images. Think about if you go onto a website of a restaurant, maybe you're going to book a reservation in advance, or you want to take a look at their menu in advance. They're really rich in terms of their images, and they spend a long time in making sure that those images look great. Usually a professional photographer, unless there's somebody, another stakeholder in the business who has some really seasoned photography skills. They're going to hire a professional photographer, and you've seen these documentaries where they show how they make the food look so good. You know, if we think of a big restaurant like McDonald's or a big chain like McDonald's, you've all seen what a Big Mac looks like when it comes out of the container. It's nothing like the photo of the Big Mac looks like on the menu or on the television commercials. These guys are actually taking maybe some super glue, making sure that the constituents of the ingredients are put together just so that the sesame seeds are in the right location. They're spritzing the lettuce or whatever to make sure that it's got a glisten to it. They really want to make sure that they communicate, because a picture's worth 1,000 words. Restaurants do that well. Could you learn from this? Is there a way that you can communicate through images and video in your various marketing channels, especially on your website, but everywhere that you market, in social media and everything? Are there images that can communicate very succinctly what it is that you do and what the value is of what you do, your product or service, so that your target market can appreciate that? And that's a much more subtle way of selling. It's like, take a look at this image. Look at these happy customers that are impressed, and it tells a story. Consider that. What else do restaurants do? Often restaurants will have specials, and they have this for a reason. It may be inventory management. There may be certain inventory of meats or seafood that they need to move within a certain time frame to avoid spoilage, and they've got to, and so these things become part of the specials, or they may have purchased a larger inventory of those ingredients and they want to move that because that's the right time of year. The produce that they're using is readily available, plentiful, locally available, whatever it is. But restaurants often have specials, and they communicate this depending on the type of restaurant. Sometimes there's a special board when you come in. You right away, while you're waiting, you're in line and you see that there's specials and they're already promoting. Sometimes they may even have a visual representation, again, an image, or it could be actually a dish that shows what the special is, and it's up front. And if they don't do it that way, it's often communicated to you by the hostess or the server right up front. They're telling you about it and they're describing it. They're describing how it's prepared and that it's on special. And again, as you imagine this, are you doing this in any way? Do you have specials? And why would you have specials? Do you lower your price from time to time? Many of you do, some of you aren't. Why not? Anytime you have inventory that is not being sold, you need to sell that. And for those of you who work as trades, who have the inventory that you're selling is time, once that time goes by, if you haven't sold that inventory, that is, so if I'm not completely booked today for my electrical work that I'm doing, let's say I have 8 hours of electrical work that I can sell today, that specialized knowledge where I can go out to businesses or residences and I can do electrical installations or repairs, whatever the case may be. To the extent that I fail to sell all 8 of those hours, if I only sell 6 of those hours, those 2 hours that remain unsold, those are 2 hours of inventory that will never be sold. It's like the fish going bad and it has to be thrown out. It's disposed of, it's wasted, you can't get it back. So why wouldn't you consider in advance, if you don't have your inventory booked completely, would you consider a special? And could you communicate that in some way? People who book before the weekend, we have for today only 20% off on electrical services, for example. So give some thought to what can you learn from the restaurants. They are selling you, and when they communicate those specials, how do they communicate them? The other part I gave you in that analogy was their description. So when you are communicating with your target market, with your customers, are you taking the time to do what that server maybe does? Or maybe in some higher class places, a chef may even come out and communicate directly with people. I'm gonna prepare directly for you. I've thought of an Italian restaurant that's fairly high class, fine dining Italian restaurant, where the owner and chef would come out and he would describe, I'm gonna prepare for you. And he didn't even give us a choice. He was like, look, don't even put the menus down. Here's what I'm gonna make for you. I've got this great. And he would describe it. I'm not gonna try to imitate the accent, but it was a great experience. Are you doing something similar with your customers? Are you describing how you're going to look after them and how you've got the best quality ingredients that make up your products or services? Are you giving them the finer details? They're communicating with you about why you will be happy and why it would be a good decision to take the following or whatever. Also think about the experience, the dining experience when you're sitting there. So a good server, a good waiter, a professional server who's going to set any records or have good sales, he's not only mentioning the specials, but he is giving recommendations based on what he thinks that the restaurant does well. Now you might think, well, everything on the menu the restaurant should do well, and that should be the case for a really well-run restaurant. But typically individual servers have their favorites and they communicate those, and they know what their patrons have most enjoyed. And it's a good idea to communicate with people and say, you will be very pleased if you go with this. Our chef does this and that, and they make recommendations. They describe how it's put together. And then, so oftentimes those are some of the more expensive dishes, but I'm not saying that's what servers always do, try to get you to buy the most expensive things. That's not what I did. And sometimes it was the most expensive thing on the menu that I was recommending. Other times it was something cheaper that I know that they would love. But then the other thing I would do is I would sell them on appetizers. There's other things that are good pairings, things that go well with a main course. Or what about a nice wine that would really complement the food choices, making recommendations, getting a cocktail for them before we go into the wine menu. Oftentimes you'll be presented at a fine dining restaurant with a wine list, but what I would always do is I would try to get a cocktail order from them before we got into wine. And I would make that suggestion. I would say, before we have some wine with the dinner, I see you've got the wine menu there. I can make some nice recommendations once I take your order of what some nice pairings would be. But before we get into the wine, would anyone like a cocktail? And so right there, you're guiding it. You're suggesting things to guide the process. It's salesmanship, but it's very low key and it's designed to improve the experience. So think of that again in the context of your business. Is there a way that you can give recommendations that you know your target market, your customers will enjoy the experience, will enjoy the product or service more if they take your recommendations? People like that. It's consultative selling. It's letting them know through the context of offering good service and letting them know, giving them access to the specialized knowledge you have as a professional, what is going to improve their experience. Think about how you can do this and frame this through the lens of your business. Also, I think about when, we talk about the appetizers, the cocktails, the wine, making recommendations. The other thing that I did well was I revisited the table more frequently. Think of the opposite for a moment here. Have you been to a restaurant where once you got your food and you had your drink, then you never saw the waiter again? He was really busy, might have been a very busy evening, and you're thinking, I kind of like another beer or whatever it may be. Maybe you just want a refill or something like that, and you never see the person again. And that's really disappointing. That's poor service. Well, good service is making sure that you would come back as a professional waiter and be there to ask them, would they like a refill? Would you like another beer? Would you like another cocktail? Would you like another, Coke? Whatever the case may be. And that's upsell. And sometimes there's free refills depending on the restaurant, but certainly not on cocktails. You're not getting another free beer. But by being there offering good service, you're getting upsells. People do want to enjoy their evening, and when they've made a decision, remember, this is just an analogy. This is a metaphor. The restaurant metaphor, for those of you who aren't in the restaurant business, should apply. And so I'm asking you, how do you do that in your business? So what is analogous to making sure you're offering good service and coming back and making sure everybody has what they need? So that we would think of as nurturing our leads, nurturing our customers. Are you communicating with your customer in some way in your business, your product or service, to let them know, would you like some more? Is there something that would go well, that would improve your experience that we offer? that would give you a more robust or a more well-rounded experience with our company? What products and services do you offer? So through your social media, email campaigns, you can send out and let people know we do have specials. We've got a new product offering. Maybe you'd like to try this. It would go nicely. We're doing this for you. This particular service you already have. This might also go well with that. And are you nurturing your leads? Are you nurturing your customers, keeping in contact with them? Or do you go radio silent? As soon as you've taken the order, it's incumbent upon your customer to communicate with you for their new needs. People have needs that arise, and they may not realize that you offer that product or service that will fulfill that need. In fact, if we go back to the restaurant for a moment, have you ever been at a restaurant and you thought we're going to go elsewhere for dessert? And you're like, okay, well, once we finish here, we're gonna head out to this place that has the best, maybe it's a bakery or an ice cream shop or something like that. And you're thinking, because that's gonna be the best experience, but then the waiter intercepts and he lets you know about the great desserts they have. I had in my career in the hospitality industry, many times people would say, oh, we don't even want to know about the desserts. I've got bad willpower. Well, you can believe me, I was going to let them know. I'd say, okay, well, this is going to be an opportunity for you to learn restraint then. I'm just going to tell you about it for next time so that you can refer your friends. We've got some wonderful dessert options here. In one of the restaurants I worked at, we had a dessert tray. You've been to a restaurant like that where they bring around a cart or a tray. In our case, it was the tray, and I would describe how each of the desserts were made. Well, it was very effective. It was a presentation. In fact, I was doing a product presentation, telling them about the features and benefits of this food. And that's what you have to do in sales. It's just sort of the proverbial walk around like they do in the automotive industry. They walk around the vehicle telling you about the features and benefits, or the pitchmen and the slices and dices, and they're selling blenders and these kind of things. They're telling you all about how much you will appreciate and enjoy this. So again, this analogy, this metaphor from the restaurant will work in your business as well. And it's just, I'm just informing you, it's consultative. I'm just gonna let you know what we have, and it's very effective. My sales for desserts were much higher than those that took no for an answer before they even did the presentation. I would often say, well, let me just present so you know what you're saying no to. You come up with word tracks, and some of you are not selling face-to-face, but this still works. You need to take this analogy, and your homework today is jot this down. Think about all the ways that a waiter or a restaurant, not just the waiter, anything, any way that the restaurant communicates to you that might influence your desire to have more, to go there in the first place, and then to maybe spend more than you otherwise would have. These tips, this sort of analogy, this way of looking at things will help you to drive sales in your organization. So just brainstorm this and think about it. I think of another organization that I worked for, another restaurant, and they invested as part of their marketing in a coupon book, one of those treasure chest or entertainment, depending on the market you're in. Maybe, I don't even know if that still exists, but back in the day, you know, people on hockey teams and kids sports teams and school fundraisers would sell these coupon books. And there's an episode of The Office where that was the prize, where it's like $35,000 in savings or something like that. And I digress. Oscar's like, you can't possibly save that much money. Anyway, I worked at a restaurant where they had these coupons, and it was a buy one, get one, the BOGO. Buy one, get one free on not appetizers, on entrees. And so what about that? It was very effective at bringing people who may not have ever engaged in, eating at the restaurant, that would come there. It's like, well, let's try this place. We've got a coupon for there, and we can get 2 for 1 in terms of our entrees. And if they like it, now we can get sales in the future. So can you do that with your business? Is there a way that you can have a loss leader? I mean, the restaurant was not making money on those entrees probably, and yet they thought it was worthwhile. And these coupon books are filled with people who are coupons attracting people to restaurants based on big discounts or buy one get one free, this kind of thing, because they're trying to conquest new customers. Once you get a customer there, it's like the drug dealer, there's a metaphor of giving them just a taste. And then once they're hooked, it's like, oh, wow, this was delicious. This pasta was delicious, or I love this. They have great steaks, whatever the case may be. And then people come back. And also they're hoping to upsell you on other types of things while you're there. It's like, okay, well, we're giving away one of the entrees, which means we're breaking even or maybe even losing a little bit of money. But if we sell some desserts, we sell some cocktails, a bottle of wine, something like this, we're actually going to do really well. So think about coupons, specials. What other ways do restaurants subtly drive sales? Have you been walking through the mall and been given at, Cinnabon, one of the freebies, where they've got the little toothpick with a little bit of the cinnamon bun? And you've seen this in many restaurant establishments where they will offer some sort of sample. Maybe you're waiting in line, it's busy to get in, and I'm not even talking about fine dining here, just like mid-range places, they will have little bites of appetizers or maybe even sips of wine. I've seen where they're passing out wine. This is our featured wine of the evening, and they're passing that out, which is making the experience better. The wait time can be driving people nuts, so they're making a better customer experience, which is one of the constituents of value. The other thing is like, wow, this is great. This tastes really good. Maybe they've done some sort of frappe, they've done some cooler or some kind of special drink, and they're offering that, or a little taster, and now you're like, oh, that was really good. Let's order one of those appetizers when we get seated right away. I'm starving, this kind of thing. So can you give free samples of your services? Remember, some of your products or services are going to go bad, so to speak. Maybe they don't spoil, but the opportunity to sell them goes down. Can you offer a sort of a lost leader to try to conquest new customers? Give some thoughts to this. Brainstorm, that's the exercise today. Brainstorm and think, what do restaurants do that is very effective for sales and marketing, and it's not too overt or aggressive? People appreciate it, they like it, people are used to it. And are you failing to do this in your business? I see so many of you, I observe so many of you don't think of yourselves as being in sales, and you're not taking the steps necessary to drive sales. And I'm not sure why in each case, without evaluating specifically, but you probably, if you do a little bit of introspection, would be able to admit, yeah, we're guilty of this as well. What can you do? If I sat here for 10 more minutes brainstorming, I'm sure I could come up with another 5 or 10 more examples. Both, especially, I didn't look very carefully at marketing. I was talking more about the interactions you have at the restaurant. But I want you to do this. I want you to do that as your homework assignment, and I want you to explore and think about just take the last 3 restaurant experiences you have. The reason the restaurant analogy is so powerful, and this is a compliment to those entrepreneurs who run restaurants, these entrepreneurs are in a very competitive, very difficult market. Running a restaurant is not easy, and they are some of the most nimble, innovative, creative, imaginative people you'll ever come across. They come up with great ideas because if they don't, they're out of business or someone's stealing their market share. You can probably think of a restaurant that you used to go to that in that particular location has switched hands 4 or 5 times. There's a different restaurant each time it goes out of business, another one opens up. That is just proof positive that it is very difficult. They operate on slim margins. Well, they have great expenses. They do have to have greater margins, but when you consider those expenses, it's very difficult, and you've got to sell that inventory. You've got to keep selling. You've got to keep the restaurant full. You've got to have people coming back constantly. And many of you run businesses where you're not so dependent on making sure that you have this pipeline full at all times, that there's this, proverbial lineup, this metaphorical pipe of people waiting to come in constantly, and a restaurant relies on that. And so they are focused on that part of the business, and you will learn a lot. You will do your business a lot of good to start focusing on that as well. You can drive sales up, then you can increase your capacities. We've got entire videos to tell you what to do once you get that. And I think that's part of the problem here is some of you don't have the capacities to handle. It's kind of a nice problem to have. You've got enough customers that you're sold out, or you don't have a lot of room for a lot of extra growth, well, that's a different problem. You need to think about that. Maybe the business owns you, you don't own the business, because you are selling at a level that you can't afford to hire more people, that you can decentralize a little bit. Well, that's going to get me into a whole nother topic and everything, so that's where I want to leave it today. I hope you got something out of this. And don't forget to do that homework assignment. Remember, you convinced me to say it. You've got that notepad, you got that pen. What have you jotted down? If you haven't yet, jot down something, or take the next 20 minutes and explore some ideas and think about your last restaurant experience, or your last 2 or 3, and what could you do in your business to emulate what those really innovative restaurant managers are doing to drive sales in a non-aggressive way that people appreciate, and it actually improves the service or the product that you offer, the value equation for your customers. And leave some comments there. I'm curious if you can think of some other ways that I didn't list that restaurants drive sales that might be a good way for you to learn from, or push back and say, well, this is a terrible way to do it. It doesn't work for my industry. I'd like to hear what you have to say and comment back. But when you leave these comments, people read them and we can learn, and that's what this is about. We need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.